Okay, a lot of guys asked where the money shot was in the last video. Here it comes. So let me show you the bottom of the pizza first. It's got a little bit of char on it. It holds from the crust. It has a slight bend to it, so it's not over-baked. And again, this is the Caputo 00, so it has a nice light crust with a good chew. And here we go. Let's see how it worked out. Wait a minute. Let's start from the beginning. It's time to make some more pizza dough. I'm going to be using the Caputo 00 pizza flour, as well as olive oil, salt, sugar, water, and some instant dry yeast. Now, I got this recipe for this pizza dough from a website called Stadler.com, and I'll leave a link in the description below. He's got a really great pizza dough calculator that lets you determine what type of pizza you want to make. For instance, Neapolitan or New York style or deep dish. You put in the information, how much dough you want to make, how many pizzas, how big the dough balls should be, and all that. And it calculates out the exact recipe for you. Now, the recipe is going to be in grams, so I weighed everything out using my kitchen scale. Pick these up for under 20 bucks all over the place, including Amazon. And I just weighed everything out. So what I have is 349 grams of Caputo 00 flour. I have 7 milliliters of extra virgin olive oil. Now, 7 milliliters is equal to 7 grams. So you could just weigh it out on the scale. Then I have 9 grams of salt, 9 grams of sugar, and 227 milliliters, which is just under a cup of water. And as far as yeast is concerned, if his recipes always show a fresh yeast, which is very difficult to find these days. So if you use an active dry yeast or an instant yeast, cut his amount in half. So for this recipe, which I've made before, I'm going to be using about 1/8 of a teaspoon. Very small amount of yeast. So let me get started. First thing I'm going to do is take my 227 milliliters of water. And to that, I'm going to add my olive oil, my sugar, and let me get my yeast. So this is a 1-pound brick of active dry yeast. I should say instant yeast. I think it was like 12 bucks. It'll last a long time. I keep it in the freezer just to make sure it gets the longest shelf life as possible. I have a 1/4 teaspoon here, so I'm going to take a half of that. And that's all the yeast I'm going to use. And I'm going to add that right in there. Now, with this type of yeast, there's no need to let it bloom. As long as you know that it's still active and alive, you should be good to go. Now, before I add the salt, you want to make sure that you buffer this liquid. So what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of the flour, and I'm going to add it to this mix and make sort of a slurry. And once this is mixed in, I can add my salt. Some people say that that salt kills yeast. Other people say that's not true. I don't know what to believe. So I've done this before. It works. So I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to add my salt. And with that, I can now start adding my flour. Just going to put half of the remaining amount in. Mix it up. And this is going to make a real wet, shaggy dough. But as you start to knead it, it'll all come together into a beautiful, elastic type dough. Really a pleasure to work with. Okay, the rest of the flour goes in. And I'm just going to mix this up in the bowl until I have very little amount of dry yeast or dry flour remaining. Good enough. So I'm going to turn this out onto the dough, onto the board, and start kneading. I'm not going to put any any flour down on the board because there's a lot of dry product in here still. I probably will have to add a little bit of a dusting of flour once it starts sticking to the board, or I'll use a little olive oil. But as you can see, I got most of it out of the bowl, and you can see how sticky it is. But hey, it comes together quickly. So then you're just going to have to knead this for about 10 minutes. And after about 5 minutes, you're going to want to stop because you're going to feel like it's enough. And if you really want the gluten development to be correct, you'll go that extra 5 minutes. And it's not that much work. You don't have to really beat it to death. You can see how sticky it is at the beginning. This will all come together. Now what you can do is once you get this put together, rolled together like this and have it all incorporated, you can let this sit for a few minutes. It's basically letting the flour completely absorb the liquids. Right now, the liquid and flour have not fully incorporated. So I'm going to try that. I didn't do it last time. So I'm going to let this sit right now and just let it rest for 5 minutes. I'm going to cover it up and I'll be right back. So now I'm just going to work this dough until I have it nice and elastic. And I'm just going to keep turning it and working it. I haven't added one bit of flour while working this dough, and the board is pretty clean. So what I'm going to do is now form a ball, and I'm going to let this rise at room temperature for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And to create this ball, basically what I'm going to do is just turn it inside itself on the bottom, wrapping it in, and folding it and tucking it in, and then I'm going to create a seal on the bottom, and then you can kind of just roll it around on your bench to make sure it's nice and sealed. And that is it right there. I'm going to put it in a bowl with a couple drops of olive oil so that it doesn't dry out. And what I'm going to do is I'll use the ball to spread the oil around in the bowl, and then just turn it upside down. And I'll cover that with a towel or plastic wrap. I have plastic wrap. Actually, what works really well are inexpensive shower caps that you can get for like $5 for $1 at the dollar store. And they're plastic. They have an elastic band. They stretch over bowls. They work perfect. I just don't have any at the moment. So I'm just going to get some cling wrap, cover this up, and let it sit for about an hour and a half. So at the end of the hour and a half, what I'll do is I'm going to divide this into 2 balls. Each dough ball will weigh about 300 grams, which will make about a 12 to 13 inch diameter pizza. One of them is going to go in the refrigerator for what's called cold fermentation, and I'm going to let that sit in the refrigerator for between 48 and 72 hours. And the other one, I'm going to just form the dough ball, and I'm going to leave it at room temperature, and we're going to have pizza tonight. Okay, the pizza dough has been proofing at room temperature for about 2 hours. Now I'm going to take the dough, and I'm going to divide it into 2 balls. So I want to get this as accurate as possible, so I'm going to use my kitchen scale. Now, according to the pizza calculator, this should weigh about 600 grams. And it weighs 560. So I'm going to do 280 grams per pizza. I'm looking for 280. Okay, that's 240. 292. 282, good enough. So I have my dough portioned out, and what I'm going to do is create 2 individual dough balls. Again, just tucking it under and pinching it off on the bottom. Beautiful dough. So I'm just going to roll this up. Tucking it under, looking to create a nice smooth skin. Pinching it off on the bottom. And there you go. I've lightly oiled this Tupperware container with olive oil. I'm going to put that in here, seal it up in the refrigerator. This one here, I'm going to put back in the same bowl that I had before. Still a little bit of olive oil in it. Cover it with plastic wrap. And this is going to stay out for another probably 4 hours. And I'm just going to let this now proof at room temperature. Okay guys, it's been 72 hours since I made this dough. It's been in the refrigerator doing what's known as a cold fermentation. I pulled it out about 4 hours ago, and it came up to temperature. Now you can see how sticky it is. It's got some air bubbles here. It's very light, and it's ready to go. I'm going to need a little bit of flour just to make working this pizza dough a little more manageable. So this is just a regular all-purpose flour from King Arthur. Now, like I said, I just want to make it so it's not quite as sticky. I don't want to degas this too much, but I do want to make it into a shape that's a little more manageable. So I'm going to try to... Now, this is New York style. This is not Neapolitan style dough. So I'm not going to worry about having this huge rim of crust that will bubble up, which is so typical of Neapolitan. Now again, just to refresh your memory, this dough ball weighed about 280 grams after the first rise and when I divided it. Now I'm doing this on parchment paper because I don't have any cornmeal to put down on my pizza peel. I'm going to build the pizza here on parchment paper. I'll put it into the oven, which is preheating right now. I'll put it into the oven on the parchment paper, leave it for about a minute. That'll solidify the crust. I can then slide the paper out, and this sits directly on the stone. So after my last pizza video, a few people made a comment about using pre-shredded cheese, that the manufacturers put some sort of additives on it so that it stays nice and fluffy and that the individual shredded strands don't clump together. So what I did was I opted for a whole milk mozzarella cheese, but I'm not going to be shredding it today. I'm going to be cutting it with a knife. I still have to get a shredder. I've also been watching videos about how to make your own mozzarella cheese, and it's really not that difficult. But it's a different type of mozzarella. It would be a fresh mozzarella that would be more conducive to a Neapolitan-style pizza. So I'm just going to use this, cut some slices, and then cut it into my own shreds. Still using the jarred sauce. Even though I bought some San Marzano style tomatoes just yesterday, I figured let me just use this up. There'll be more pizzas in our future. So, like I always like to add, this is our pizza mix, and this is from myspicesage.com. We're going to make a mushroom pizza. Yvonne likes fresh mushrooms, so I'll do half fresh, and I like canned mushrooms on my pizza, so I'll do half fresh and half canned. And then she always likes to put some of her fresh herbs on it. She has basil and oregano that she grows in the greenhouse. Done. Let's put this on the peel and take it outside. In my original review, I made a note that having a door would be beneficial to this oven, especially on days where there's a little bit of wind blowing around like today. I had a piece of what's called rake flashing from a metal roof that I installed, and I just took it and put a knob on it, held it together with some washers and a nut, and it makes a perfect door. And it really cuts down on losing the inside temperature. So the oven's been on now for about 15 minutes, and we are just under 500 degrees. I'm going to measure and see how hot we are on the stone. Okay, our stone is reading about 420, depending on where I hit, 423, 431. So I'm going to give it a couple more minutes. Okay, I'm at 479 right now, just shooting right through this little corner here. 523. I'm going to get this pizza on the stone. Our interior temperature, air temperature, is reading about 525 right now. So I'm going to give that about a minute, and then I'll remove the parchment paper. Okay, I'm going to see if I can slip this off the paper. And there it is. Our inside temperature is just under 500 degrees right now. Okay, I think we're about done. What I'm going to do is raise it up here in order to get the hottest temperature possible on the surface. And that may brown the crust a little bit and maybe brown the cheese up a little bit as well. I couldn't do this in the original review video that I did because I didn't have a peel. There we go. So let me show you the bottom first before I cut it. It's got a little bit of charring right here, which is nice. Yes, another thing on the agenda to buy is either a pizza wheel or a pair of good scissors for the kitchen. So here's the final pizza. and it's a nice evening. It's a little windy, but we're going to sit outside for a few minutes. Okay, where were we? The investment in the Caputo 00 is definitely worth it. Game changer. Guys, thanks very much for watching. If you have any questions about Caputo 00 flour, the Camp Chef pizza oven, let me know in the comment box below. We appreciate you watching. Buon appetito. Good! I liked it.